My man Zero asking the right questions. So with all jokes aside, finally, Camie is introduced in the anime. As a manga reader that has been anticipating her character introduction in the anime, I'm finally happy to see this episode. Now, obviously, she was kind of introduced already in the last week's episode, but we finally got her character, her voice acting, and all of that this week. And she's a character that I grew very fond of, and is honestly one of my favorite characters of this series just because of how her personality is. Now, I need to ask, anime onlys, how do you feel about Camie? Since this is your first time really getting to see her character, her personality, everything about her in this episode, I'm very curious. How do you feel about Camie? Do you think she's a good character? Does she have potential? I'm very curious to see what you think, because she's honestly one of my favorites, and hopefully you guys do enjoy her. I especially love her voice acting, by the way. Oh my god, the voice actor nailed her character and the lines that she delivered throughout this part in the series. I really like how within the episode there was this stalker type vibe that Camie was giving off when she was talking to Izuku. And I remember when I first read this in the manga, honestly, I didn't really catch that. I didn't catch that, personality trait of Camie with her being a stalker, acting like a stalker, and I was just like, yo, when I saw this in the anime episode, I'm like, they really nailed it. I think anime onlys are going to be able to catch how her personality is and just how eerie in a way it was. I especially love the freaky facial expressions that Camie made throughout this episode, but I was just really surprised by how well done the voice acting was for Camie's character, especially when it came to the stalker-like trait to her character. Now let's get into that, okay, her quirk, and most likely what would explain that reasoning to why she was acting like a stalker. Obviously, she's able to shapeshift into others. We've seen this in the episode when she shapeshifted into Ochako to try to trick Izuku to put the ball on one of his targeters to eliminate him. And honestly, that's a pretty scary ability. I mean, she may not be able to replicate, from what we could see, the quirk of an individual, but at the very least, she's able to fool people. It's used to get close to someone and fool them to, be able to get what you want. So she could easily play the part of undercover missions. For instance, she can, sneak in on a villain organization, act like she's one of the villains and all that, and then she can get information, get out and relay it to the police force. That's kind of what Camie's quirk is all about, which is pretty interesting when you think about how it would benefit Hero Society. But let's explain why she has that stalker-like trait. So, it's kind of obvious when you think about it, but when you are having to become like a doppelganger, you're turning into someone else, obviously you can't just turn into them and expect everybody to believe that you're that same person. It's kind of like this, okay? Let's say I was to turn into any of you guys out there that's currently watching this video, and I was to try to live your life. If I didn't really know much about you, and I was talking to your friends and family, you're like, there's something wrong about you, there's something off and all that. And if we were in a society with quirks or abilities with stuff like that, someone would assume I'm, not really you. I'm actually a fake or something. And that's kind of what is going on with Camie. The reason why she has that mentality to want to find out, like how she was probing Izuku for questions and all that, like what makes you tick, why do you want to be a hero or whatever, the reason why she was doing that is because if she does transform into Izuku, she wants to be able to understand how to get away with it. For instance, she can't just transform into, let's say, Ochako and not have a proper understanding, which that was her downfall within this episode. Now, here's another thing too we need to look at when it comes to Camie's quirk. There has to be some form of limitations. We don't really know exactly how it works, the conditions to get it to start. For all we know, she might need a few pieces of information to be able to transform into someone, which is why she was probing Izuku for information. For all we know, she might need to know, how he is as a hero, or how he is as a person, before she can transform into someone. We don't really know exactly how she activates her quirk at all, but we do know that she was able to transform into Ochako, which makes you wonder, how did she manage to accomplish that when we know that she didn't really encounter Ochako at all in this fight? So how did that happen? That leaves a big question in your mind when you're looking at that scene in this episode. Now, let's talk about another part about this episode that truly surpassed my expectations, and that was also getting to see Ochako not being a damsel in distress. typically in a shonen, you have it to where a main female character turns out to be a damsel in distress. She is, needing to be saved by the main characters of the story. I've seen it time and time again throughout so many shonen and seinen, josei, and all that. I've seen it many times over. And I know many coming into this episode and watching that moment when Ochako was falling and Izuku had to save her, it was an epic moment if you're like a, Ochako and, Izuku shipper, which I am, but at the same time, if you pay attention to these cliches or how annoying that is, it did not fit Ochako's character. It honestly undermined a lot of her character development that she's been getting in the recent episodes if she really was that helpless and needed Izuku to save her. So, in a way, many would have had a problem with this episode if it wasn't corrected towards the ending part of the episode when we found out the truth on that it was a decoy Ochako. So, yeah, that entire scene was kind of like a fake out from Horikoshi Sensei, trying to say like, yeah, don't worry, the main female character, or one of the main female characters, Ochako, she is not a damsel in distress, she's very strong, and I was very happy to see that, especially when I read it for the first time in the manga. I remember when I saw that in the manga, I was actually pretty frustrated, not gonna lie. I was a little bit upset. I was like, oh, like, I like Ochako, I like Izuku's relationship with her, and how there's a ship between them, but at the same time, I don't want to see Ochako's character development get undermined just to have a romantic moment. I don't want that whatsoever. I don't want this turning into fairy tale. So, that upset me when I first read it. But then, as the, chapters continued, I was like, oh, okay, that explains a lot. I'm like, you know what, that's pretty awesome to do, which is when I started to really gain a lot of respect for Horikoshi as a writer, because he honestly always flipped, like, cliches on its head. He always spun them around and made you think about, like, wait a minute, he's doing a twist to every single cliche. In this case, that's what just happened. For instance, Ochako, even though she was depicted to be a damsel in distress, it wasn't really her. Camie didn't have Ochako's quirk, couldn't utilize it, which in turn, that's how, Izuku found out that Ochako was a fake and was actually Camie. So that, I love intelligent characters. I love how that did not happen. That cliche did not happen. So just great overall, amazing scene. Now, getting back into Camie as a character, though, I do want to talk about the aspect of how in this episode, she also seemed to know a lot about Izuku and Ochako. Now, granted, we do know that within this episode and last episode, we have been reinformed on the fact that, thanks to the sports festival, pretty much everybody knows about them, knows about their quirks and all that. But at the same time, once again, I want to remind all of you, again in this video, that we don't really know how Camie's quirk actually works. We don't know if she needs a condition or requirement to transform, if she needs to get up close and put her hand on them, if she needs to, get some information out of them. We really don't know how it works, but at the very least, it does seem like she knows them. And the way she talks to Izuku and Ochako, it's a very weird, moment. And you're like, whoa, she must have been analyzing them constantly when when she was watching the sports festival, which would fit with her quirk. Because, you gotta remember, she's the type of person that has to become a doppelganger. She transforms into others, so obviously she needs to analyze things about people to be able to transform into them. So it would explain why she seemed so familiar with them, and why she acted like she did, and knew, somehow to go around Izuku while he was fighting, how to kind of outsmart him or how to get behind him and sneak into the shadows. Just the way that was done, it showed that she was very experienced with hand-to-hand combat, and she also knew some of the aspects of how Izuku fights. Which, here's a thing too I want to point out, is that at the end of the day, when you think about Camie's quirk, the doppelganger quirk, how she's able to transform into others, that quirk is not necessarily good at fighting. For instance, she may be able to transform into others, maybe transform into someone that has a better physical body, that might be a little bit stronger, but it's clear as day that she's not able to use other people's quirks. She would have used Ochako's quirk if she could. So, most likely, she just gets their body. She just transforms to them, gets their voice, and all of that. Which would mean that technically, she has to rely on her own physical expertise, her strength, her, dexterity and all that, to be able to fight someone. So it's kind of similar to what Stain is, or how Aizawa is. Aizawa may have an eraser type quirk where he can look at someone and erase their quirk, but technically, when he takes down villains, he has to fight them with his bare hands. He has to bring them down with his own strength, not a quirk. And that's what you could see what Camie is. She fits into that department. She has to bring people down with her own strength instead of using her quirk. She may be able to fool someone, sneak up on them, but at the end of the day, though, if someone has a good understanding of how the person is and they can call you out on it, your quirk is not really going to help you. It's a very situational quirk, so to say. So yeah, that's a cool little thing about Camie I like, and it's one of the reasons why I fell in love with her after, this moment in, the manga. So, how do you feel about that? I'm very curious. How do you feel about Camie as a character after all this information that we got? So, Inasa, That man, seeing him in the anime, another character that had a great spotlight in this week's episode. Seeing him wipe out a lot of people all at once, like a bunch of people, and eliminate them with their own balls was pretty freaking crazy. And it really shows how strong the man is. And when you think about it, his quirk is like airbending. He is able to manipulate the air and then use it against his opponents. And his quirk, automatically on paper and just looking at it, it's a pretty OP quirk. I mean, imagine being able to manipulate the air is pretty ridiculous. And we gotta remember that, you know, My Hero Academia, it gets pretty in-depth with some of its quirks, or how they work. I mean, look at how Bakugo's quirk works, look at how, you know, other characters like Ochako works, or Ida's quirk works. There's some quirks that obviously have a lot of depth to them. And so you most likely are like, whoa, Inasa, what he could do with this quirk is pretty ridiculous. I mean, if he's able to control the wind, that means, in theory, he might be able to create storms or something, because if he's able to manipulate wind pressure and all of that, and change, you know, where clouds are positioned or whatever, you know, he can actually make thunderstorms or something, which would be pretty ridiculous when you think about how wind works and how, you know, his quirk might work. So it's pretty crazy. But at the same time, we gotta remember, all quirks have weaknesses. We have seen this time and time again. I mean, let's think about Izuku. He breaks and shatters his bones when he uses his quirk. Ochako, she gets nauseous if she uses her quirk. Every single individual usually has a weakness to their quirk. So the same could be said about Inasa. He has to most likely have a weakness that, you know, he's not letting us know, and we have to figure out for ourselves. But also the same could be said about Camie as well. She probably has a weakness too, most likely the requirements to activating her ability, or in terms of just how the ability works in the first place. There's probably some certain conditions or weaknesses. Maybe she can only transform into a certain amount of people. That's the point I'm getting at. All quirks have weaknesses, and even though Inasa does have a pretty strong quirk, and I admit it's an extremely strong quirk, it does not mean that he's automatically invincible, because he probably has a weakness, because every character we've seen usually has one. Let's also talk about, in this episode, the censorship. Yes, there was actually some censorship, and honestly, it's not that bad, but many will complain about it. I already saw it on social media, so I might as well mention it. The censorship is regarding to Camie as a character, or when she untransformed and became her Camie self, she basically, she went completely nude, which you're like, whoa! Like, whoa! Now, if you noticed, her skin was like, it looked like she was wearing like some form of like latex suit or something, the way it was shaded. And I want to be honest with all of you, if you are anime onlys, in the manga, she was completely nude. Well, it didn't show anything, but she was completely nude. And the extra, like, coloring on her body scheme when she did that in the anime, it was just censorship, which makes sense. I'm not complaining whatsoever. But yeah, I'm just clarifying that there was some censorship. It's not that bad, honestly. People that are complaining about it, come on, man. It's not that bad, really. At least you're not seeing, like, big black balls like you saw in, you know, Terraformars and all that. You know, how the cockroaches were holding a head, and it was completely censored with a big black ball that you can put in Photoshop. Little dab on Photoshop. So I'm really glad we don't have censorship like that, and at the same time I'm glad we don't have the, you know, beams of light that you normally see. So I think it's honestly not that bad whatsoever. So Todoroki, he was fighting the Power Rangers, or the Naruto ripoff Power Rangers. That's what it looked like to me. And oh my like, yo, that scene was pretty funny. Like, that gave me honestly a good laugh, just seeing how Todoroki was legit fighting ninjas that looked like they were from Naruto, but also ninjas that looked like Power Rangers. I'm like, oh, this can't be a coincidence by any means. I mean, there's some funny things throughout this episode, especially the Todoroki moments, but incredibly strong. But at the same time, we gotta remember what the opponent said that Todoroki's facing. Don't underestimate us, which that is a big thing you need to understand, because they're in a situation where they don't really understand everybody's ability. Everybody knows how their abilities work, but at the same time, they have to understand when the people they're fighting, they don't know what they have. So they're at a disadvantage, which I talked about in my last episode review, so I'm not going to kind of get back into that, but they also need to be very cautious with who they fight, because if they don't take their time, they're going to get wrecked. So anyways, let's talk about the other character that was kind of properly introduced in this episode that has the quirk Vibrate. Definitely going to be able to, you know, make his girlfriend happy or wife happy when he finally gets one. But jokes aside, though, he pretty much can create earthquakes. It's kind of like similar to Whitebeard in a way, and he can literally cause trembles to uproot the ground, earthquakes, and all of that. And on top of that, when he uses his quirk, though, he does have a drawback. His body starts trembling, and eventually he won't be able to move. So this goes back into what I said earlier in this video, that all quirks have weaknesses. Even though they're incredibly strong, there always is a drawback to every single one, which that's what this man's drawback is. If he uses his, quirk too much, vibrate, it'll cause it to where he will not be able to move. Kind of similar to how Izuku couldn't move at all. Speaking of Izuku, I do want to talk about something that, was a big highlight to me as a manga reader, but also just as a fan of My Hero Academia. I don't know how many of you noticed this, but Izuku, he was taking responsibility. And what I mean by that, he was taking responsibility for his actions he did against Muscular. Now, obviously, he's not upset with that he got to save Kota. Like, he saved Kota, he's happy about that. And Kota is very happy, too, that he got saved. But at the same time, though, we also got to remember that thanks to Izuku's actions, in a way, he indirectly caused what happened to All Might. And he kind of explains this properly when he was starting to monologue within his mind. He's like, if I didn't break my body and shatter my body, I would have probably been able to save, Bakugo. And if I was able to, save Bakugo, then All Might wouldn't have had to rush out and eventually fight All for One. And when you put all the pieces together, it does kind of stem back to Izuku. Izuku is kind of the originator of this. I mean, he can't place all of the blame on himself, obviously. I mean, he's just a kid at the end of the day, and he's not a pro. But still, he is partially to blame, and he is taking responsibility for what he kind of did cause. For instance, he realizes now breaking his body is no longer the answer. He cannot continuously use 100% of One for All without his body being able to handle it. If he does it, obviously he's probably going to wind up in a similar situation to where he's not going to be able to save someone. And that is why he's going to restrain himself and have discipline to where he doesn't overexert himself. And I like the little line where he says, before I can save others, I also need to be able to save myself as too. I need to be able to protect myself and keep myself in top condition. That is a great line, because when it comes to heroes, they also, even though they're selfless and they're willing to charge out there and sacrifice their body, for instance, All Might and what Izuku has done, they also need to understand that they need to take care of themselves too. If they can't take care of themselves, they're not going to be able to save anyone, or themselves as well. So it starts to show that there is a flaw in Stain's ideology. That's kind of what that moment was representing. Remember, Stain's ideology and what he thinks a number one hero is a hero that will blindly charge out, being very selfless, and die just to save someone. Which, like I said, is an honorable act, and many would commend that, say, good man, trying to do that, saving someone at the cost of their own life. You would commend him, obviously. I would too. I would be real. But at the same time, to not care about your own life and charge in blindly is also reckless. And that is kind of what Izuku is learning, that he needs to care about his own self too. Even though he will willingly put his life down to protect someone else, he also needs to take precautions to when he has to do that, he's in top shape. That's what he's trying to say. He's willing to push himself that far, but he needs to be in top shape, and he needs to make sure when he does do stuff like that, it's at a proper moment. And that's kind of what was showing his progression, his character development he's gotten in these previous arcs. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it when it comes to this week's episode of My Hero Academia. Overall, a great episode. I think many can agree that in terms of progression-wise for Izuku's character, spot on. Camie's introduction, quality. Inasa's character, love his design, love his voice acting, love how he just wiped out a bunch of people. I mean, there's just a lot of great moments overall throughout this episode. So yeah, tell me your thoughts in the comments below, how you felt about it as well. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Stay healthy, stay warm, and also on top of that, if you like my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like, and if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.